Welcome to the debate. Today we are conducting a sort of forensic examination of the way human beings organize themselves. We aren't just talking about politics or economics in the abstract here. We are looking at them through a very specific set of blueprints. We're analyzing Thomas Sowell's seminal work, Knowledge and Decisions, but we are doing it through the architecture of choice slide deck.
Right, and that deck it's essentially a series of technical visualizations that distill Sowell's pretty dense economic theory down into mechanical schematics.
Exactly.
And mechanical is absolutely the operative word here. When you look at these slides, you don't see the usual soft imagery of society. There are no, town halls, no voting booths, no people holding hands. You see circuit boards, funnels, pressure valves, and gears. It effectively turns sociology into engineering.
Which is exactly why it is so clarifying. The central question we are debating today is the one posed by the very first slide in that deck. How do we judge our social and political institutions? Do we judge them by the common view, which is their stated goals, their noble intentions, the flag they wave? Or do we judge them by the analytical view, strictly by their internal mechanics, their incentives, and their feedback loops?
And that distinction is really where the tension lies. You are going to champion the analytical view presented in these diagrams, this idea that society is a machine to be optimized.
I am. I'm arguing the position laid out in the incentives slide, that there are no solutions, only trade-offs, and that decision-making has to be analyzed through the cold, hard lens of cost, constraints, and structural incentives. If you look for the quote-unquote good guys in politics or business, you've already lost the plot.
And I will take the opposing view. While I appreciate the diagnostic brilliance of these schematics, and they are brilliant, I am here to question whether reducing human decisions to gears and mechanisms ignores the moral necessity of shared social intentions. You can explain how a machine works, sure, but that doesn't tell you why we built it, or frankly, if it's the right machine to begin with.
Fair enough. Let's get into the machinery then. I want to start with the position statement for the analytical view. I'm looking at the slide titled The Common View versus the Analytical View, and it sets the stage perfectly. On the left, you have a man staring up at a flag on a pole. That flag represents intentions. It's the war on poverty, the Department of Education, the Anti-Inflation Act. It is the stated goal.
It's the aspiration. It's what we hope to achieve as a culture.
It's a wish. But on the right side of the slide, the analytical view, the man is looking down. He's looking at the base of the flagpole, and the base is cut away to reveal this complex system of gears, pulleys, and torques. The caption reads, "Social analysis must focus on mechanisms, not noble goals." This is the fundamental error of modern thought. We look at the flag, the wish, and we completely ignore the gears, which are the reality.
I see the gears, but surely the flag matters. I mean, if the gears aren't turning toward a specific purpose, they are just grinding metal.
But the gears determine the outcome, regardless of what the flag says. Look at the slide labeled Rationality within Constraints. This is a perfect example. It visualizes the regulatory loop. You have a circle connecting the regulator, sympathetic regulation, future career and industry, and low civil service pay. The diagram shows a closed circuit. The regulator is a rational person. He isn't bad or corrupt in some cartoonish, villainous sense, but he has an incentive structure. Low pay now, but a high-paying job in the industry later if he plays nice.
Right, which is the classic revolving door phenomenon.
Correct. But the slide specifically points out that you cannot fix the system by replacing the people. You must change the incentives. If you put a better person in that exact same gear mechanism, the torque, the actual pressure of low pay and future career prospects will eventually grind them into the exact same shape. The thesis is clear. We have to focus on who decides and how they decide, not what they hope to achieve.
I understand the mechanism you're describing, and I don't deny that incentives drive behavior, but let me offer the counter perspective. I'm looking at the slide titled The Architecture of Choice, which depicts society essentially as a circuit board. It's clean, it's linear, and it's completely devoid of humanity. My position is that this analytical view risks oversimplifying human society into a cold calculation.
It's a simplification for clarity, not a denial of humanity.
It shows a cloud labeled society crossed out with a massive orange X. Below it, you have specific icons: a house for the family, a desk for the bureaucrat, a factory for the corporation, and a gavel for the judge. The argument there is that society is a fiction. Only individuals decide.
Because that is factual. Society doesn't eat breakfast. Individuals do.
Strictly speaking, yes. But that reductionism misses the emergent reality. When you look at the family icon or the judge icon, these aren't just isolated economic units maximizing utility. They are bound by culture, tradition, and moral obligation. Things that, frankly, don't fit neatly onto a circuit board. My thesis is this: while incentives absolutely matter, viewing all of civilization merely as a way to economize knowledge misses the human element of why we build these institutions in the first place. If we treat a judge merely as an economic actor responding to incentives, we erode the very concept of justice. We need the flag, not just the gears.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on justice. You think justice comes from the high ideals of the judge. I'm arguing, based on the material, that justice is a product of the constraints on the judge. But before we get to justice, we really have to talk about where ideas come from in the first place. This brings us to our first core point of debate: the authentication of knowledge.
This is the funnel diagram.
It is. I want to pull up the slide labeled the authentication process. This is arguably one of the most critical visualizations in the entire deck. It shows a large funnel. At the top, you have raw ideas. The slide notes they are super abundant and cheap. Everyone has an idea. Everyone has a policy proposal.
There ought to be a law, as they say.
Exactly. But as you go down the funnel, there are filters. The first filter is logic. Does the idea make sense internally? The second is evidence. Is there actual data to support it? And the third, the most brutal one at the very bottom, is competition. Only after passing through these grades do you get the output at the bottom, knowledge. The argument here is that without this costly filtering process, ideas are just noise. In the market, if you have a bad idea, you lose money. That's the competition filter working in real time.
And the implication being that politics lacks this filter?
Precisely. In the political sphere, you can bypass the competition and evidence filters entirely with good rhetoric. You can jump straight from raw idea to law. The slide explicitly warns failure to filter ideas leads to catastrophic decisions. When we skip the mechanics of authentication, we end up implementing fantasies. We get policies that feel incredibly good, but fail because they were never actually stress-tested against reality.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes the competition filter, the market, is somehow infallible. Let's look at this slide juxtaposing the primitive man and the modern expert. This visual actually strikes me as a warning against the very system you're praising.
How so? It clearly shows the efficiency of the modern system.
Look at the left side, you have primitive man. He has arrows pointing to botany, weather, hunting, medicine. He has to know everything to survive. His knowledge is authenticated by life and death every single day. If he eats the wrong berry, he dies. That is a very tight authentication loop.
Right, but he is poor and lives a brutally short life.
True, but look at the modern expert on the right side of the slide. He has a laser focus on one single thing, a computer chip. But behind him is a ghosted image of unknown system complexity. Global supply chains, automated infrastructure, banking protocols. The caption says he needs to know very little to survive. My concern is that we have outsourced authentication to a massive, opaque system. If we rely entirely on specialized experts and abstract systems to authenticate knowledge, do we become vulnerable when those systems are completely insulated from reality?
What do you mean by vulnerable in this context?
The modern expert doesn't know how to survive. He only knows how to operate within the machine. If the global supply chain breaks, or if the financial models are just wrong, the expert is helpless. The primitive man had a more robust, albeit simpler, authentication process. The modern market filter can be distorted by bubbles, by fraud, by short-termism. You say the market filters bad ideas, but sometimes the market rewards bad ideas for a very long time, like subprime mortgages, until the whole system crashes. That isn't a filter, that's a time bomb.
It is a filter, it just operates on a different timeline. And that leads directly to our second point, the feedback loop and the cost of error. This is where the difference between the common view and the analytical view becomes deadly serious.
You're referring to the slide comparing the market and politics graphs.
Yes, look at the visual. On the top graph, the market, you see a performance line. At the exact moment a mistake is made, the line drops off a cliff. The label points directly to it. Immediate feedback, loss or bankruptcy. The feedback is swift and brutal.
And the bottom graph?
Politics. The line continues straight even after the mistake. It dips only slightly and much later. The label says, delayed feedback, elections or insulation. This explains why things go wrong. In politics, the cost is separated from the decision.
So you're arguing that insulation is inherently a defect.
It is a defect if you actually care about correcting errors. Look at the slide, cost is foregone opportunity. It shows a cow being processed. It's a simple flowchart. Branch A goes to a yogurt cup, meaning the milk. Branch B goes to a baseball mitt, meaning the leather. In the middle, there is a giant logical gate labeled XOR, exclusive or. You can have the yogurt or the mitt, not both. The cost of the mitt is the yogurt you didn't get.
Right, standard opportunity cost.
Exactly. In a market, you feel that cost immediately. If you buy the mitt, you don't have the money for the yogurt. But in politics, because of that delayed feedback graph, we pretend we can have the whole cow, the yogurt and the mitt. We pass legislation that promises everything to everyone, and because the feedback is delayed, hidden in inflation or national debt, we never feel the XOR gate snap shut.
That's a compelling argument regarding fiscal responsibility, but have you considered that the insulation in politics is a feature, not a bug?
How can insulation from reality possibly be a feature?
Look at the formal processes slide. It shows a crate labeled the political package deal. We'll get to the crate in a moment, but think about the structure of government shown back in the regulatory loop. It is designed to be stable. If the Supreme Court or the Federal Reserve reacted with the volatility of the stock market, dropping off a cliff every time a metric shifted, society would be utterly chaotic. The delayed feedback allows for long-term planning and stability against the passions of the mob.
But that stability comes at the cost of truth. If a policy is actively destroying wealth, stability just means we keep destroying wealth for 4 more years until an election forces us to look at it.
Or it means we don't dismantle a vital social safety net just because of one bad quarter. The market feedback loop in the slide is too idealized. Sometimes the market feedback profit doesn't capture social cost at all. Think about a factory dumping chemicals into a stream. The factory is profitable. The feedback loop says, good job, keep going. But the river is dying. The market graph doesn't show the river dying. It only shows the stock price rising. We need the political graph, which is insulated from pure profit motives, to capture what the market misses.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The market misses things only when property rights aren't defined. If someone actually owned the river, they'd sue the factory, and the cost would be internalized immediately. But let's look at how we actually make these choices. This brings us to the third point, incremental trade-offs versus categorical solutions.
This is the dial versus the switch.
Right. The slide cost of knowledge compares 2 specific mechanisms. On the left, you have informal process, represented by the family. It depicts a dial, like a safe combination or a volume knob on a stereo. It allows for high nuance and fine-tuning. A parent can treat one child differently than another based on the highly specific, localized situation.
And on the right,
Formal process, representing the government. It depicts a giant toggle switch, on or off, categorical, blunt.
and the argument is that as we move decisions from the family to the government, we lose the dial and are forced to use the switch.
Exactly. Look at the incremental substitution slide. It shows a scale from the first gallon of water, which is labeled priceless or survival, to the 1,000th gallon, which is trivial or washing the car. In reality, we trade increments. I might trade a little bit of safety for a little bit of speed when I drive. But the political package deal slide, the crate, shows that in politics we just can't do that.
The crate visual is incredibly striking. It shows a wooden box nailed shut containing defense policy, education, and fiscal policy, all jumbled together. The stamp on the side literally says, take it or leave it.
Because you can't go into the voting booth and say, I want candidate A's tax policy, but candidate B's foreign policy, you have to buy the whole crate. This is why economics is rationing, as the scale slide shows. When you force categorical decisions, like free healthcare for all or zero tolerance, you are pretending that scarcity simply doesn't exist. You are ignoring the imbalance shown on the scale. You are treating the 1,000th gallon of water with the exact same sacredness as the first gallon, which inevitably leads to massive waste.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the switch is always inferior to the dial. Yes, the family can fine-tune, but can a nation of 330 million people fine-tune?
They can if they use the market. The market is 1 billion dials. Every time you buy a coffee instead of a tea, you are adjusting a dial.
But for some things, we need the switch. We need the categorical. Think about fundamental rights. We don't want incremental substitution when it comes to free speech or slavery. We don't want a market trade-off on whether you can buy a human being. We want a switch that definitively says off.
That is a fair point for fundamental rights, life, liberty. But the slide deck applies this to social and economic decisions. When you use the switch for things like rent control or price fixing, you jam the gears. You try to force a categorical result on a fluid reality. You say rent shall be $500, flick the switch, and suddenly no one builds new apartments because the incentive is gone. You've used a moral switch to solve a mechanical problem, and you broke the machine.
But notice the cost of knowledge caption again. It says formal organizations lack this knowledge and must rely on blunt, categorical rules. It explicitly admits the limitation. My argument is that this bluntness is the price we pay for civilization. We are strangers. I can't treat you with the nuance of a family member because I don't know you. We need the switch of the law to function as a society, even if it's less efficient than the family dial.
But that's exactly why we should keep decisions out of the sphere of the switch whenever practically possible. That's the whole point of the architecture of choice. Every time you move a decision from the market, the dial, to politics, the crate or the switch, you are destroying information. You are taking a fine-tuned mechanism and smashing it with a hammer.
Oris, you are taking a chaotic, amoral scramble and placing it inside a container of order. The crate might be a package deal, but at least it's a package we voted on. It represents a consensus, however messy it might be.
Voted on with delayed feedback and insulated consequences. It's a consensus of illusions.
And your market-decided alternative comes with immediate pain and absolutely no regard for the vulnerable. It's a consensus of the ruthless.
We're circling back to the core tension here, so let's wrap this up.
Agreed.
From the analytical view, these slides prove one undeniable fact. Man is no Aristotelian god, as the quote on the first slide reminds us. We are fallible, we are ignorant, and we are heavily constrained. Because we cannot know everything, we must trust systems with aggressive feedback loops, markets, over those that rely on articulation and intentions, politics. The identity of the decision-maker is the most fundamental question. It's not what is decided, but who has the incentive to get it right. If you ignore the gears, the machine will eat you.
And from my perspective, while the architecture of choice is a brilliant diagnostic tool for why things fail, it is not a complete moral framework. It explains the how but ignores the why. Yes, the political package deal is a blunt instrument. Yes, the regulatory loop creates perverse incentives. But the slide society decides nothing is a dangerous half-truth. Society is the agreement to care about the outcome, not just the process. If we deconstruct society down to just economic units and incentives, we might optimize the gears, but we risk dismantling the engine of shared human purpose.
A powerful disagreement, as always. The slides don't give us the answer, but they clearly show us the true price of our choices.
Indeed, there is a lot more to explore in this material.
We encourage you, the listener, to find these slides, look at the gears, look at the flags, and decide for yourself which architecture you trust.
Thanks for joining us for this discussion.
See you next time on The Debate.